let's get started. Hey ladies and gents, if you're new here, my name's Nicole. I'm gonna be reviewing all the books that I read in January. Yay! This January I read 7 books in total, which I think is pretty decent, taking into account that I am 1, still a student, and 2, I don't review or read books for a living. That said, let's just get straight into the book wrap up. So the first book of the year for me was The Prison Healer, and funny story, I actually started this book in 2023, but I ended up finishing it in 2024 on January 1st, right after I did like the New Year's countdown. I went back and read the last few chapters, and let's say it was an okay book, guys. The premise of this story is we have our main character, Kiva, who works as a healer within this prison that she's been trapped in since she was like, what, 10? And her peaceful yet sort of dangerous life gets interrupted when the rebel queen enters this prison. And Kiva, you know, being the main character that she is, ends up volunteering herself for these 4 elemental trials in order to save both the queen's life as well as her own life. The thing is, no one has ever survived these trials because it tests you on all 4 of the elements, and only people of the royal family have elemental powers, and Kiva, being a prisoner, has none. So it's very unlikely that she's going to survive. Prior to reading this book, I originally thought that Kiva was going to be like similar to Katniss Everdeen, you know, beating the odds. But I was pretty disappointed with the book overall. I gave this book a 3 out of 5 stars, and here are some of the reasons why. 1, this book was pretty slow paced in my opinion, because every single time Kiva would be doing like one of the elemental trials, there would be a 2-week interval in between each of her trials, which just made the story very slow paced, and I got pretty bored. Like, girly, I don't want to hear about your healer duties. I want to see how you know, beat the trials, beat the odds. 2, the author continuously highlights how Kiva is a survivor, but she never backs that up with Kiva's actions. I think I was most disappointed by how Kiva didn't accomplish any of her successes in the trials by herself. Okay, minor spoilers ahead, so if you don't want to hear, just skip ahead. But the prison that Kiva is living in is notorious for being unfathomably difficult to survive in, and so for Kiva to have, you know, survived 10 years, it's very important to her character that she is a survivor. It becomes very crucial to her identity. But the author makes it so that every time Kiva makes it through a trial, it's because she was aided by some mystical object or she was saved by a man. I'm okay with this happening occasionally, but it gets very tiring and discouraging when all of her successes are because of something else and not her own abilities. Low-key, I think the author just set Kiva up for failure. Lastly, this book just didn't stir any extreme emotions from me. During the romance, I didn't really giggle or kick my feet, and during her trials, I wasn't on the edge of my seat wondering like what was going to happen. So overall, this book was just very average. I think a lot of my critiques are due to the way the author set up this world and prepared it for the next 2 books in this series. So you can see how later on in the series, this will become more developed and more interesting and action-packed. But just right now, it's not a series I'm thinking of continuing. Despite all of my critiques, I actually did like this book. That's why I got a 3-star rating. Come on. The ending truly got me, and like the last few pages, like the plot twist made me go, I mean, if you're looking for an introduction to fantasy or just a new fantasy series to start, maybe give it a shot, you're willing to commit to a trilogy, then I think this would be a good shot for you. The next book, or really series I started, was the Folk of the Air series. That's very well loved on Book Talk. I finally hopped on the hype train, guys. For context, the Folk of the Air series starts with a girl named Jude who is a mortal, and she was sort of kidnapped and brought into the world of the Fae when she was just a child. This book basically covers a lot of palace politics and the story of how Jude rises to the top, despite her being mortal in a land full of, you know, immortal, all-powerful Fae. Now, I rated all of these books 5 stars, and is it a little bit biased? Maybe, but I enjoyed all of them, and it just, let me show you my reaction right now. Cruel Prince, I was like, oh, this is pretty good. And then I didn't think it'd get any better. Wicked King. Oh my god, oh my god. I got to Queen of Nothing. You see all these tabs? I was like, blown away. So yeah, it just got better and better. Like, you can clearly see from my tab marks how they just got more and more clustered. So it was a very well-loved series. So the first book in the series is The Cruel Prince, and this one is less romance and more political. The next 2 books start to have a little bit more romance in them, but it's not the main plot, guys. I think a lot of people I saw on the internet were a little bit disappointed because there was not as much romance as they were hoping for, but I really love it. Like, guys, I'm a C-drama fan. I love, you know, palace politics, so this was really my cup of tea. So let me just talk about a few things that I liked about the series. Firstly, Jude. Duh. Jude is an incredibly vicious and independent woman who knows what she wants, is willing to do the hard things in order to get it. She is a badass, ruthless, and confident, which I don't see a lot in other fantasy female leads. At least not to the extent of Jude. Like, Jude, she could be a villain, TBH. Another thing I liked was Holly Black's writing. Her writing kept me so entertained and just made me want to keep reading. Like, literally, Cruel Prince read like in what, 2 days? I'm not sure. These 2 books were read in 1 day. I was at the salon for like a couple of hours, read them both. This was my first introduction to the world of the Fae. I've never read a book like that prior to this, so it was a great introduction. The series was enchanting and charming, and the vibes were immaculate. This might be a minor spoiler. You kind of know already who the love interest is, but fine. If you don't want spoilers, skip ahead. Here's the only thing I didn't like about this series. I did not like the sort of bully trope that was going on between Cardan and Jude. Cardan is a very flawed character who is not the nicest to Jude in the beginning, to say the least. I had trouble processing how Cardan could go from hating her to respecting her to loving her. Like, I know he liked her from the beginning, and that's just how he processes feelings. Like, I know it's a meme within the community, but still, I don't like a bully trope, guys. I can't do it. I won't spoil the actual plot, but I just thought the way their relationship progressed seemed a little bit unrealistic. But that didn't distract me from the story. I ended up loving, you know, their relationship at the end, and they're so cute, and I just love them. So it wasn't a big issue, but one of the things that just really stood out to me. So if you're looking for an action-packed fantasy series with a strong female main character and a charming male main character, then look no further. This one will get you hooked. Okay, the next book I read on my phone, and it was Haunting Adeline. When I read this, the way it made my jaw drop and my eyebrows go like, I know. To be frank, I knew that this book would be relatively taboo and pretty spicy since it's a stalker dark romance, but the things that happen in that book, oh, we don't talk about it. But I guess we're about to talk about it anyways. So the premise of this story is we have our main female character, Adeline, who is an author, and she moves into her now newly deceased grandmother's house. She finds a journal in that house that belonged to her great-grandmother and realizes that her great-grandmother also has a stalker like she does. She starts to solve this cold case because her great-grandmother was actually murdered. At the same time, Adeline is being stalked by this guy named Zaid, who is some powerful dude whose occupation is basically taking down these serial rapists and human traffickers. Before I get into the spies, I have to say that I actually did enjoy reading the parts where Zaid was taking down these human traffickers. It felt so satisfying reading about him killing these people. I was thoroughly entertained. That's the only reason why I rated this book barely 3 stars. If I could, maybe 2.5, but 3 stars because I actually enjoyed the satisfaction of watching revenge in action. However, the spice was pretty taboo and not for the faint of heart. I understand that since it's dark romance, you know, filthy spice is basically what I signed up for, but I think just that level of spice, I'm not there yet. I'm not there yet, guys. I just think towards the end, there was a lot of it, and I just got tired of reading. I just skipped through it by the end because I was like, what's the point? I want to know what happened to the bad guys. And let's also be honest, kids around my age, 17 to 18, we're starting to become adults, and we're bound to have read, you know, some levels of spice. Yay, go Wattpad and AO3. Fan fiction introduced us. However, I wouldn't recommend any of my peers to read this. Guys, don't do it. Please, please save yourself the time and go read something more worth reading. If you're looking for just absolutely deranged taboo spice with little bits of mystery though, this book might be for you. Next, it's my first memoir of the year. It is I'm Malala by Malala, of course. I read this for school, and despite it being, you know, mandatory reading, I still loved it regardless. Now, if you somehow don't know who Malala is, she's an activist for women's education who originated in Pakistan and ended up winning the Nobel Peace Prize for her activism. At the time when she was still in Pakistan, the Taliban were sort of taking over and using religious extremism to their advantage to restrict women's rights by telling them they have to dress a certain way, they can't go outside without a male counterpart, etc. This memoir describes her life as she navigates the restrictions of the Taliban and practices speaking out for what she believes in. I don't typically rate memoirs because how can I rate someone's life experiences, right? But I did really enjoy this book despite its simple language. I think this book is targeted for kids of a younger age than me, but It's someone's life story, come on. I loved it. It was a breeze to get through. There was nothing I essentially disliked about this book. I think Alala's an amazing woman. I think she taught me the importance of using your voice, especially as a woman. If you're already interested in her life story, then go ahead and read this. I think it's a fantastic read. But me personally, I probably wouldn't have picked it up if it wasn't one of the options for required reading. I just have so many books on my TBR plate, but I'm so glad I picked it up. So if you're looking for a short memoir to read, I got you. I got you. The last book that I read in January was Check and Mate by Ali Hazelwood. The joy I felt reading this book. Insane. I was grinning and giggling all day while I was reading this in class, and all of my friends even noticed. Of course, they called me out on it. But how can I not giggle and grin? It's so good. So the premise of this story is we have our main character, Mallory, who used to be a chess prodigy, but then she ends up quitting in her childhood because of some unknown trauma that has to deal with her dead dad. She ends up playing chess at a charity match as a favor for her friend, and then she ends up somehow miraculously being paired with the #1 chess player in the world, Nolan Sawyer, and she ends up beating him. Now this dude is somebody who's like not easy to beat. He's #1, and nobody beats him, and their chess match goes viral, and so she's sucked back into the chess world. Nolan ends up becoming quite infatuated with her, and he ends up chasing after her to try and get her to play another match with him, and also probably for other romantic reasons, but we'll get to that later. I know that this book should probably be a 4.5 stars. I can't. Despite the issues I have with this book just purely based on vibes alone and the amount of dopamine levels I had, 5 stars. Absolutely. Mal and Nolan's banter is just absolutely incredible and hilarious, and I love how every time I read an Ali Hazelwood book, she teaches me something about myself throughout the process. I can relate so much to Mal, who is a tired older sister with daddy issues. I even shed a couple of tears towards the end when she was reconciling with her family and dealing with her trauma, which just goes to show how impactful this book was to me. Yeah, didn't think I was gonna cry from this one, but I did. All compliments aside, I was a tad bit bothered by the author's use of slang in her books. Like she mentioned AO3, TikTok, BTS, the list goes on. It was a bit cringy, but I just turned a blind eye to it because I loved all the other parts of this book so much. Also, Miss Hazelwood, we officially have beef, because how could you end the book like that? Without spoiling it for you all, there was an event at the end of this book that we were all looking forward to. That's what the plot was driven towards. I was anticipating a long-ass explanation of Mal's victory or whatever the happy ending is supposed to be, but all I got was a newspaper clipping about what happened. That was basically just like the epilogue. It was disappointing because I wanted more details on what happened in the end, but I think maybe it's just because I love Ali Hazelwood's book so much that I just didn't want it to end. It just seemed very anticlimactic. Overall, the amazing book. Despite all the critiques I've mentioned, there is literally no world where I could dislike this book. Check and Mate truly holds a very special place in my heart. If you are a fan of the Netflix show The Queen's Gambit, or just want a cute romance with competition and fun banter, then this is your book. Please do me a favor and just read this. So those are all of my reviews. Please in the comments let me know like what you thought about these books if you've read them, or just leave me book recommendations. I'm always looking for the next book to put on my TBR list, so just let me know. And if you thought this video was interesting, subscribe and like it. And that's it. I'll see you guys later. Goodbye.